Lagos, the nation's commercial capital. This is the News at 10. Live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Olumide Macaulay.
Hello and welcome. Tonight, President Muhammadu Buhari meets with service chiefs in the wake of rising attacks and banditry in the north, says their best is not good enough for the country. Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 says restart of domestic flights scheduled for June 21st is not feasible until it's safe, secure, organized and efficient. Aviation unions demand special intervention from the federal government to save sector from collapse as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. And Burundi's newly sworn-in president, Evariste Ndayishimiye, warns opposition parties against questioning of government as he takes oath of office. Plus, business and news from Abuja, the FCT, and later from our studios in London.
On business news tonight, Central Bank of Nigeria plans to integrate non-interest window in its loans facility to support small businesses and households affected by COVID-19.
On sports news tonight, World Athletics says Russia's Athletics Federation must pay its $5 million doping fine by July the 1st or face sanctions.
And from Abuja, Central Bank announces 432 billion naira fund for farmers of 9 key commodities for the 2020 planting season to cushion the effect of COVID-19.
Your best is not good enough. These are the words of President Muhammadu Buhari to service chiefs and heads of other security agencies when he summoned them to a meeting at the State House in Abuja. At that meeting, which held at the council chambers today, the president told them in clear terms that no more excuses will be tolerated. The National Security Advisor Mohammed Mungunu re-echoed the message of the president when he briefed State House correspondents after the meeting. Ibrahim Adra reports.
Boko Haram insurgency, banditry, kidnapping and armed robbery are some of the dimensions of insecurity playing out in different parts of the country. The consequences are severe. In all, the citizens bear the brunt. Tackling these menaces is the cornerstone of the Buhari administration. Successes have been reported, but violent crimes are far from over. An upsurge in some part of the country necessitated the recent visit of the National Security Advisor and the Inspector General of Police to Sokoto and Katsina states. It's not a surprise, therefore, President Muhammadu Buhari summoned a meeting of the country's security heads. They met for hours behind closed doors, during which the president did not hide his displeasure.
Mr. President has expressed great concern over the declining security situation in the country. He is extremely unhappy about what is happening, and he feels that even though the security agencies are doing their best is not good enough for him, and he wants an immediate reversal of the current trend, an immediate reversal of our misfortunes in all their dimensions.
He also gave further directives.
Again, Mr. President has also said that it is extremely important that we in the security agencies must ensure that we justify the leadership by not disappointing the populace.
The National Security Advisor expresses hope of turning the tide around.
My office is also going to call on certain governors, starting with the governors of the Northwest Zone, including the governor of Niger State, to come over to Abuja so that I meet with them and my colleagues in intelligence and security. Finally, Mr. President is gravely disturbed about issues of lack of synergy within the security sector.
Many citizens lost their lives in recent security breaches in some parts of the country. This is in spite of the efforts of the security forces. It's instructive that this is the first time the president is telling security chiefs that their best is not good enough. Nigerians wait to see how the Security High Command will respond to the directives of the Commander-in-Chief. From the Presidential Villa, Ibrahim Adra, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, even as the president demands a more proactive response, the military authorities have announced the killing of 42 terrorists and bandits by forces in counterinsurgency operations in the northeast between June the 11th and today. Addressing a news conference in Abuja, the coordinator of the Defense Media Operations, Major General John Eneche, also says 38 hostages were rescued in addition to the recovery of several arms and ammunition. He adds that troops in the Niger Delta uncovered and destroyed 5 illegal refineries.
In the northeast, the armed forces of Nigeria have intensified its offensives against the BHC ISWAP terrorists through concerted and deliberate land and air operations in line with the operational mandate to decisively end all terrorist activities in this region. Significantly, between 11th to 18th of June, I will talk about a significant event, maybe one. Troops of Operation Lafia Adole carried out several aggressive clearance operations at various locations within the theater, including a daring counter-attack on Boko Haram terrorists who attempted to infiltrate Mongonu town on the 12th of June 2020. The counter-attack by own troops at Mongonu resulted in the neutralization of 41 terrorists and the recovery of a large cache of arms, ammunition, and equipment, as well as the rescue of 33 captives, among others.
Meanwhile, the umbrella body of Muslims in Nigeria, Jama'atu Nasir Islam, has condemned the wanton killings by bandits and Boko Haram insurgents in the northern parts of the country. According to the JNI in a statement signed by its Secretary General, Dr. Khalid Aliu, the bloodletting could have been avoided by the government if the government had been more proactive in addressing the situation. The group also criticizes what it describes as the lackadaisical attitude of relevant security agencies despite repeated calls for decisive action. Staying with security, elder statesman Dr. Junaid Mohammed has been speaking on the spate of killings in the north and other parts of the country. In an exclusive interview with our correspondent in Kanu, the Second Republic lawmaker says President Muhammadu Buhari should have sacked the service chiefs before now, as they failed in the discharge of their duties to the nation.
I think you cannot dissociate the issue of banditry in the northwest, the terrorism in the northeast, with the issue of injustice, economic and political injustice, which has been the bane of these areas from time immemorial, number one. Number two, that you cannot dissociate these issues with the problem of governance. These are fundamentally governance issues, problems, and if we are not prepared to confront the issue, then we have very serious problems ahead of us, ahead of the country for a very long time to come. Thirdly, we must have a system which works as a system. Everybody in Nigeria now knows that every one of the generals who is now heading any of the services has been due for retirement, not once, not twice. Now, the assumption people had was that these people who are supposed to be children, quote unquote, of a system are being treated as if they were above the law and they are above the procedures and the systems and the principles which set up in their own respective services. The idea that you are fighting a war, the people who are fighting the war are failing woefully, but somehow nobody wants to ask them to go. And there is massive scandal, there is massive corruption and incompetence among the top people who are prosecuting the war, yet even when they are being dealt with, they are being dealt with selectively.
Dr. Janae didn't stop at that. He also gives some insight into how the security situation can be better handled.
What is happening is that, first, I think there is a humongous misunderstanding about the meaning of the responsibility of government. The primary responsibility of government is the maintenance of law and order, protection of life, property, and dignity of people. Once a government fails in that, whether it claims to be fighting corruption or it claims to be honest, it has a certain sense of integrity which nobody else had before, which is a lie anyway. It is obvious that somehow something is going to cave in. And it's not surprising we're having the results we're having now.
Staying with security, the chairman board of trustees of the Coalition of Northern Groups, Rastura Sharif, has been released from police custody. He was arrested 2 days ago for leading a peaceful protest in Katsina State over the rising insecurity, mostly in the northern part of the country. In a statement by the spokesman, Abdul Aziz Suleiman, he insists the group will never relent in the struggle for a decent, free, fair, and just society, no matter the odds. Now to our coverage of the COVID-19 pandemic. The tentative date for the reopening of Nigeria's domestic flights, which is June the 21st, is no longer feasible as more work will still need to be done to ensure safety in the sector. This was announced by the Director General of the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority at the daily news conference by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. The chairman of the PTF, Mr. Abbas Mustafa, also listed inadequate manpower and shortage of protective equipment as some of the challenges they have to grapple with since inaugurating in March.
It's 3 months on Wednesday, June the 17th, since the PTF was inaugurated to coordinate the national response for COVID-19. The aviation minister is represented by the Director General of the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority. He gives further update on the proposed date to reopen local flights, which is June the 21st.
Based on what we have, we'll have some work to do. As such, June 21st is not a feasible date to resume operations domestic. The civil aviation industry will only give the go-ahead when we are ready, nothing before then.
The Minister of Health also announced the inclusion of dexamethasone among treatment drugs that Nigerian clinicians will be using for patients going forward.
Luckily, this medicine is not new. It's well known. It's used for other purposes. It's a steroid that is used generally for many other purposes. These are not medicines you should be using. These are medicines that the doctor is to use. So we are going to ask our clinicians to also consider adding it to their trials and seeing what result it works in our own circumstances.
While the chairman of the PTF lists the achievements of the task force since its inauguration, he says inadequate manpower and citizen attitude to change are a major challenge for the response.
Like the rest of the world, our national response continues to face challenges, especially as there is no known cure for the virus presently. These include inadequate infrastructure, manpower shortage. By far, the greatest challenge are human resistance to change.
The national coordinator says the risk of contacting the virus is higher now than it was a few weeks ago.
Now, more than ever before, if you go out, you are more likely to get COVID than before. Your risk of acquiring COVID because of the numbers we have now is more than 3, 4 weeks or 5 weeks ago when we had a lockdown. So there really isn't any room for relaxation at this point.
Nigeria has recorded a spike in the number of cases since the first phase of the ease of lockdown was announced 6 weeks ago, as apprehension continues to mount whether the government will announce a total lockdown again.
In part 2, after the break, heavy rainfall bites harder in Lagos as flood sweeps away 4-year-old girl. Streets waterlogged. Please stay with us. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10, live on Channels Television, Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. President Muhammadu Buhari meets with service chiefs in the wake of rising attacks and banditry in the north, says their best is not good enough for the country. Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 says restart of domestic flight schedule for June 21st is not feasible until it's safe, secure, organized and efficient. Aviation unions demand special intervention from federal government to save sector from collapse as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. And Burundi's newly sworn-in president warns opposition parties against questioning of government as he takes oath of office. Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms on Apple TV, Android TV, Fire TV, and Roku. Aviation workers are asking for special intervention in the sector to save it from collapse. The National President Air Transport Services Senior Staff Association, Illitrus Amadu, says ahead of the reopening of the airspace, the federal government must ensure all health and safety protocols are in place to curb the spread of the virus. Our correspondent Linda Akigwe reports.
COVID-19 has affected the global economy, and one of the worst-hit sectors is the aviation industry. Nigeria's aviation sector was barely limping along before the advent of the virus in the country, and the shutdown of airlines because of the pandemic is worsening an already fragile industry. The state of the aviation sector is the reason for this meeting between the Senate Committee on Aviation with unions in the industry. Officials of the unions are worried about the challenges plaguing the industry because of COVID-19 and the level of the federal government's preparedness to reopen the airports on June 21st.
You can imagine an agency like the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria superintending, managing 22 airports. 2 months into COVID-19, they are unable to pay full salaries to workers. It portends great danger for our industry. Beyond that we are being programmed to restart in this state of affairs. I can say without any doubt in my mind that the two most important elements, safety and security, stands compromised.
They're asking the federal government to provide interventions for the aviation sector.
What is the nature of the intervention we're asking for? Monetary intervention for the aviation agencies and towards payment of salaries and meeting other basic obligations that would make the airports safe before flight operations commence.
It will be suicidal to allow you guys to man the facilities if you are saying you have not been paid and you are being paid half salary. Aviation is not where you tell the pilot to park on where you're taking off. So we must see how we can address these issues.
The unions are also asking that protocols for health and safety be harmonized across all the airports in the country. Linda Akibe, Channels Television News.
From the aviation sector to the northwestern region of the country, where residents of Kaduna may have to brace up for another round of lockdown in the face of rising cases of COVID-19 in the state. Governor Nasir El-Rufai said this in Kaduna while commissioning a mobile testing laboratory for community testing of COVID-19 cases. According to the governor, carefree attitude of the people about the dangers of the pandemic could worsen the situation.
Kaduna State Governor Nasir El-Rufai is on hand at the Government House premises to commission a mobile testing laboratory for community testing of coronavirus cases. Governor El-Rufai speaks on the strides made so far in the fight against COVID-19 in the state, even as he revealed that the state needed to be reopened for the people.
We decided to gradually reopen the state because we want economic activities to resume, and we also are confident now with the testing capacity we have. We have 3 test centers in addition to this vehicle, a total of 4 testing facilities. We are now in a better position to test. We test hundreds of samples every day. We are targeting to do 50,000 samples in the state, which will give us a pretty good picture of the geography and demography of the disease and be better able to handle it. So we are more confident of dealing with the infection than 3 months ago when it broke out.
While noting that the mobile testing laboratory will help in early detection of COVID-19 cases in all 23 local government areas, the governor sounds a note of warning to people who refuse to play their part.
We cannot stop the spread. There is nothing we can do about it. Even with our best efforts of closing borders, people still find a way to get in. And part of the reason why we took the decision to even dismantle the borders is that we realized we just created a business for the security agencies. Once our officials leave the place, they allow people to pass upon a payment of an amount of money. So people are still coming in, people are still bringing the infections, but some people are getting rich in the process. If we get to a level that the infection rates will overwhelm our health system and our health workers, we will lock down again, we will go back to the complete lockdown. So I'm appealing to the people of Kaduna State to comply with the protocols put in place and to minimize going out.
The mobile expert laboratory, donated by USAID, is fully equipped with vital testing instruments with a capacity of 400 tests daily.
And now it's time to join our studios in Abuja for more stories. Here's Linda Akigbe. Linda, so it appears the court's very influential in deciding who's emerging as the acting national chairman of the APC.
Yes, Olumude, apparently so. And we begin with the court stories. So Justice Samira Baturi of the FCT High Court has extended by 2 weeks an earlier order affirming Victor Giadom as APC acting national chairman. The order issued on March 16, 2020 confers the running of the party affairs on Mr. Giadom pending the outcome of a national executive committee of the party. Besides the extension, the court also restrains the APC or any other member of the party from disturbing Giadom from functioning as the acting national chairman. The court further ordered the national vice chairman Northeast, Mustafa Salihu, to act as national secretary in the interim. Mr. Giadom's counsel, Wale Afolabi, had asked the court to extend the order pending the hearing and determination of the motion on notice. Now, ahead of the All Progressives Congress governorship primary for Edo State, scheduled for June 22nd, the party's National Working Committee has inaugurated its election and appeal committees. At the inauguration ceremony in Abuja, the NWC approved acting national chairman, Mr. Hilary Etta, inaugurated the Governor Hope Uzodinma-led 7-member election committee with Senator Ajibola Bashiru as secretary. The party also inaugurated a 5-man appeal committee chaired by Dr. Yusuf Naji as chairman and Mr. Kayode Ajulo as secretary. And in Edo State, the Court of Appeal has declared that there is merit in the All Progressives Congress appeal challenging a federal high court on the mode of its primaries to be adopted ahead of the governorship election in the state. Delivering its ruling today, the appellate court set aside the order of a lower court. The 3-man appellate justices, led by Justice Morenike Ogunwumuju, therefore asked the parties to lay down their swords until the matter is dealt with at the Federal High Court, which sits tomorrow.
The order restraining APC from conducting primaries or taking any step towards that direction has been vacated and set aside. The order restraining APC from taking any step to do 8 order has been set aside by the Court of Appeal.
Their lordships have given their opinion. In the first appeal by the party, there was a split decision. Majority, that is 2-1, they set aside 1 out of the 4 reliefs granted. The relief which granted orders preserving the status quo, that was set aside, but the court retained the remaining reliefs and directed that the matter should go back to the lower court for trial on the merits.
Meanwhile, the Federal High Court sitting in Benin City has adjourned the money laundering case instituted by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission against Mr. Osagie Ize-Iyamu and 4 others to July the 2nd. The defendants, who at the last sitting challenged the charges on the ground that they contained the name of Chief Tony Anini, who is now deceased. EFCC counsel, however, told the court that the matter was for ruling on the competence of the 8-count charges preferred against the defendants, a position which the judge agreed to. After the ruling, Mr. Ize-Iyamu's lawyer told the court that he had filed another suit challenging its jurisdiction. Away from legal issues, the Central Bank of Nigeria has announced a 432 billion naira fund for farmers of 9 key commodities for the 2020 planting season. The Director of Development Finance at the Apex Bank, Mr. Yusuf Yila, lists the commodities as rice, maize, poultry, cassava, tomatoes, fish, cotton, cocoa and dairy. He explains that the intervention is expected to produce over 8.3 million metric tons of the targeted commodities.
The effect of COVID-19 pandemic is taking a toll on the economies of many nations around the world. As countries are seeking ways of mitigating the effect of the pandemic, Nigeria is also trying to build a resilient economy. At this meeting organized for farmers, officials of the Central Bank of Nigeria list some interventions for key agricultural commodities.
For the 2020 wet season, we're going to be doing the largest Anko Borrower program so far. We're looking at financing over 1.1 million farmers in a single year. Combined hectarage of over 1 million hectares. We're also looking at output of 8.3 million metric tons.
We are pushing hard to ensure that the agricultural sector is given all the impetus it requires to lift the economy out of recession.
The interventions are for crops such as rice, maize, cotton, cassava, fish, oil palm, tomatoes and livestock. A total of 8.3 million metric tons of the commodities is expected to be produced. The farmers are hopeful that the latest commitment from the Apex Bank will increase production of food.
Today, after all these processes of border closure, lockdown, banditry, Boko Haram and what have you, still Nigerians are eating from what we produce in Nigeria. And it's all about the achievement, the plans and programs of Anko Borrower program.
Right now, there are gineries that were probably capacity utilization was about probably 20%. As I speak to you today, it's about 79%.
While the nation's food import is set to have reduced by over 82%, key players agree that with more support, the nation will gain access to the international market for export.
We'll bring you more stories from Abuja when the news at 10 returns. Plus, Central Bank of Nigeria plans to integrate non-interest window in its loans facilities to support small businesses and households affected by COVID-19 pandemic. That's in Business News. Join us again. Welcome back to the news at 10, coming to you live from Abuja. Today's flooding from the heavy morning rain in Lagos might have claimed its first casualty, as the Lagos State Emergency Management Agency says it is searching for a 4-year-old whose parents claim was swept away by the floodwaters. The incident reportedly happened around 10 a.m. at number 38 Fashola Street, Orile Agege. The flooding forced many to stay indoors in the early hours of the day, and those who attempted to step out were held in traffic.
It's a wet day in Lagos. The rain, which began in the early hours of the day, poured heavily all through the afternoon, resulting in flooded streets and roads across the metropolis. Most of the drainage systems could not contain the magnitude of rainwater. The weather compelled most residents to stay at home, but some did not mind negotiating gridlocks. From the Long Bridge, inbound Lagos, leading to the old toll gate, the traffic is heavy. But traffic out of the state is smooth. While some motorists choose to defy safety implications and the drizzle by driving against traffic, most commuters opt for commercial motorcycles to reach their destination. The rains also take a human toll. Somewhere in Orile Agege, a 4-year-old girl is allegedly swept away by the flood, and her parents fear she might have died in the process. This is confirmed by the Lagos State Emergency Management Agency.
The information that the parents informed us was that their 4-year-old was swept by the flood. And that is the information gathered now. And we've commenced the searching, and we've started pumping the water so that all the drainage we could see clearly, and we are hoping for the best.
As the rain intensifies, officers of the Lagos Sector Command of the Federal Road Safety Corps are out to ensure that traffic flows smoothly. In a special intervention codenamed Operation Visibility and Impact, the command says it has deployed at least 300 men to complement the efforts of other traffic management agencies towards reducing accidents occasioned by poor visibility and flood.
Despite the rain, despite the flood, the traffic is moving because of the intervention of these men. And these are the things we are putting in place within this period. That is going to be regular, it's going to be continuous. As we are managing the township, we are managing the corridor.
For some days now, Lagos has witnessed heavy rainfall, and it seems there's more in the offing as experts predict extreme rainfall in 2020.
Operators in Nigeria's oil and gas industry continue its delivery of the NNPC-led intervention initiative to help curtail the spread of COVID-19. This time, Nigeria NLNG is donating medical consumables and equipment to the Lagos State government and specifically to the Infectious Diseases Center, Mainland Hospital.
It is an NNPC-led oil and gas industry intervention on COVID-19. A concerted effort of the industry players to help the country fight the virus to its knees.
Continue on the effort of the oil and gas industry intervention.
The corporation says it has conducted a deliberate needs assessment in collaboration with the government, and the supplies are not only strategic but also based on scale or preference.
It's an informed decision by the industry under the leadership of the Group Managing Director Malam Mele Kari to bring together all the industry players under the auspices of the international oil companies, the independent petroleum producers of Nigeria, the midstream players under MOMAN, and all other stakeholders, including NIFE.
A long list of various ICU items and laboratory equipment, the donor says, are all best in class.
This donation specifically to Lagos State is part of Nigeria LNG's $1.25 million worth of donations, which we are giving to 6 states of the Federation. as part of our contributions towards the NNPC-led Oil Industry Fund intervention for COVID-19.
The Group General Manager NAPIMS, a subsidiary of the NNPC, overseeing the corporation's joint upstream investments with major oil-producing companies, carried out the symbolic presentation of the equipment.
As a symbol of what we are giving,
the Lagos State government says the donation is coming at a time when the state is ramping up its efforts against the biological threat, COVID-19, and other emerging infectious diseases.
It is exactly what we need at this point in time. We are establishing a very elaborate chain of isolation facilities. And if you have the time one day, I would like the opportunity to show you around the mainland hospital, which has become the nerve center.
Right from the word go, the group managing director make it emphatic that there's not going to be cash donation, but there's going to be donation in kind.
With the total commitment of 21 billion naira and plans to extend the supplies to more states, the corporation is confident that processes and procedures will not be compromised.
That's all from Abuja. Back to you, Olumide.
Thank you, Linda. To the NDDC, if everything works to plan, the new headquarters building of the Niger Delta Development Commission in Port Harcourt should be ready for commissioning within the next 6 weeks. That's according to the Commission's leadership, which is relieved that the building is now being put to use many years after the foundation laying. With work in progress, the acting managing director is moving staff to the new building, insisting it'll hasten the completion.
Acting Managing Director of the Niger Delta Development Commission, Professor Kemibradi Kumoponde, walks up to the premises of the new building of the Commission, where construction work continues. This is not like previous visits, which were for project inspection. Rather, it signals the relocation of the Commission. Along with other members of the Interim Management Committee, they move into this building, its permanent headquarters on the Eastern Bypass, relocating from its former office at Aba Road in Port Harcourt, the River State capital. The Commission's strategy, according to the lead man, is to stay here until the project is completed.
Any project gets completed faster when there is activity in it. Our movement here means that by the next 1 or 2 days, another floor might be occupied, another floor, so it's going to be gradual. When Nigeria moved from Lagos to Abuja, it was phased, but it was, if they were waiting for Abuja to be completed before movement, we'll still be waiting till today.
There is reported skepticism about the leadership of the Commission states its readiness to take the bull by its horns to ensure that there is no going back on this decision.
The last time national anthem was sung on this particular premises was 25 years ago during the foundation laying ceremony of this edifice. Today, 25 years later, we were able to sing national anthem on the 12th floor of this building.
Like many projects in other parts of the country, the outbreak of the coronavirus also took its toll on the progress of work, but there are high hopes that this will be due for commissioning in a matter of weeks.
The movement to these headquarters, I believe, should also mean an improvement with the services rendered by the MDDC.
Relocation to the 13th floor building is projected to be in phases.
And now it's time for business news. Here's Anne Wanguro.
Thank you, Olumide. Welcome to Business News. The Central Bank of Nigeria has unveiled and released plans to a framework for the integration of the non-interest window in all its intervention programs, especially the Anchor Borrowers Program and the Targeted Credit Facility to support households, micro, small, and medium enterprises affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. This was disclosed at a stakeholders meeting held today in Abuja to review the successes recorded so far under the ABP and strategies for the 2020 agricultural wet season. Meanwhile, a statement from the financial market regulator says that the governor of the CBN, Godwin Emefiele, has directed the Development Finance Department of the bank, as well as the Nisero Microfinance Bank, to fast-track the approval process of loans to help restore businesses and livelihoods. Nigeria's premium oil grade, the Bonny Light, has dropped to $38.70 a barrel, and that's after rising to as much as $40 last week. This is due to excess crude supply on the international market. This is coming as international oil price benchmark Brent crude jumped by 1.87% to $41.47 a barrel today, while its contemporary, that's the US WTI, went up 2.32% to $38.84 a barrel. The gains on the benchmark come amid concerns about rising cases of COVID-19, as well as the meeting of the OPEC Plus, which sought to review record oil supply cuts in a bid to support prices. More than 20 billion naira, that's the amount that has been lost today as renewed profit-taking on local bourse had investors wasting no time to cash in on the previous gains recorded this week. Let's hear more from Bisi Adebayo.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Reports. The equities market was initially cruising in positive territory thanks to a 5% gain from Tier 1 lender GT Bank until just about 30 minutes to the close of trading when the gain reduced to 0.43%, and that did the damage. And that's not all. Sell pressure on Nigerian breweries also did another spoiler on the market. Now, all of these led to the oil share index declining 0.16%. And this also rubbed off on the banking and consumer goods sectors, as you can see. And interestingly, though, volume and value came in good today, reflecting the resounding confidence in the market, and these Tier 1 lenders drove the numbers. Traders are confident that the market is on the path of short-term recovery and will end the week in positive territory, as today's losses only reflect a spiral effect from the global markets. And that's it on the Stock Market Reports. I am Bisi Adebayo.
Major markets around the world have ended today's session with mixed sentiments on renewed concerns of rising spread of coronavirus. Let's take a look at the closing numbers for today. And that's Business News Tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu. Back.
Thank you, Anne. Still ahead on the news at 10. Burundi's newly sworn-in president, Evariste Ndayishimiye, warns opposition parties against questioning of government as he takes oath of office. Plus, more stories from our London studios with Around the World in 5. Please stay with us. Welcome back. To law enforcement, anti-graft agency, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, says it's investigating considerable cases of cybercrime against Nigeria's most wanted hacker, Ramon Igbalode, also known as Ray Hushpuppi. A statement from the Commission's spokesperson, Dele Oyewale, says the AFCC is familiar with the details of Hushpuppi's money laundering transactions involving many high-profile cyber criminals facing trial in Nigeria. Mr. Igbalode was recently arrested by the International Police, Interpol, and the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation in the United Arab Emirates in connection with a $35 million ventilator scam. The EFCC says it's engaging with the United States FBI in tracing victims of his fraudulent transactions and other fraudsters having direct involvement with him. Burundi's new president has warned opposition parties there will be no more business as usual as regards their questioning the government. Evariste Ndayishimiye was sworn in earlier today in the country's administrative capital, Gitega, in a ceremony witnessed by a few former African leaders and representatives from the EU and other organizations, and thousands of Burundians at the stadium. He also asked the media and human rights activists to partner with the government to tackle national issues. Otherwise, they'll be working for others and not Burundians. Here's Simon Pusey with more international stories in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London for your international news around the world in 5. An image has emerged showing a crude weapon purportedly used by Chinese forces in the fatal brawl along China's disputed border with India. This picture has been widely circulated, showing one weapon allegedly used in the clash, which appeared to be made from iron rods studded with nails. People in India have since held funerals for some of the 20 soldiers killed on Monday. It's the first time there have been casualties between the two countries in at least 45 years. Protesters in the northern city of Kanpur held a mock funeral for Chinese President Xi Jinping, lighting a casket draped in a paper Chinese flag on fire before dumping it into a river. Troops remain on alert on both sides of the border, despite the two governments agreeing not to take any steps to escalate the crisis. Garrett Rolfe, the white former police officer who last week shot dead the African-American Rayshard Brooks in Atlanta, has been charged with felony murder.
Charges against Officer Rolfe. The first charge is felony murder.
The former police officer was fired the next day after surveillance video showed his actions. The death of Mr. Brooks further highlighted racial concerns in the United States after weeks of protests over racism and police brutality triggered by the death of George Floyd. Mr. Rolfe faces the possibility of life in prison or the death penalty if convicted. The US President Donald Trump has declared the United States would not close businesses again, as several states reported rising numbers of COVID-19 infections.
We won't be closing the country again. We won't have to do that.
Mr. Trump also commented on the controversial book written by his former National Security Advisor John Bolton, saying Bolton had broken the law by including highly classified material. The book contains revelations about Trump's alleged endorsement of Chinese internment camps and plans to invade Venezuela. The Trump administration is making a last-ditch effort to stop the publication. They claim it would compromise national security. Nearly 80 million people worldwide were displaced in 2019 alone. That's according to a new report of the United Nations. According to the survey, more than 1% of humanity were uprooted at the end of 2019 after fleeing wars or persecution. This would be a record figure, capping a tumultuous decade of massive displacement, according to the UN. The figure rose by some 9 million people from a year before. Syrians, Venezuelans, Afghans, South Sudanese and Burmese were the most displaced populations. Russia has staged its first nighttime Victory Day parade rehearsal ahead of the annual celebration on Red Square. The celebration this year was delayed, of course, due to the coronavirus lockdown. The parade was designed this year to mark the 75th anniversary of the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. It was planned to happen on May the 9th, but then was postponed until June the 24th due to the pandemic. Some cities in Russia have cancelled the celebrations altogether due to coronavirus fears, but Moscow's flagship parade is still due to go ahead. Chinese President Xi Jinping says China will exempt some African countries from repaying zero interest rate loans due at the end of 2020. President Xi spoke under the framework of the China-Africa Cooperation Forum. In the president's words, this action would be aimed to ease the pressure on countries particularly hit by the pandemic. South African Airways says the government needs to find more than $500 million of new money to save the company. The airline hasn't made a profit since 2011 and has burned through more than 20 billion rand of bailouts in the past 3 years. Their rescue plan has been repeatedly delayed, with senior officials and trade unions applying pressure for the airline to be saved, despite the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbating its long-standing problems. In Zimbabwe, the government has raised salaries for public employees by 50%. It comes after nurses stopped work at a major government hospital in the capital, Harare, demanding to be paid in US dollars because of soaring inflation. Workers fear the country is returning to the 2008 era when a bout of hyperinflation rendered salaries and savings worthless. And finally, a mysterious 68-million-year-old fossil found on an island on Antarctica's coast may have belonged to a huge marine reptile that lived alongside the dinosaurs. The fossilized egg is the second largest egg on record. The only creatures in Antarctica at that time large enough to lay such an egg were seagoing reptiles. The fossil challenges the widely held belief that these animals did not lay eggs. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Time now for some sports news. The Federal Ministry of Youth and Sports Development has confirmed that the committee set up by the National Council on Sports to assess the possibility of organizing the 2020 National Sports Festival has submitted its report. The ministry said it will study the report and will act on it after consultation with the COVID-19 Task Force, Ministry of Health and Nigeria Center for Disease Control. World Athletics has insisted that it will not defer Russia's Athletics Federation's $5 million doping fine. The World Athletics fined Russia's federation $10 million for breaching anti-doping rules in the month of March. And Leicester City has announced that the City Sales Centre at King Power Stadium will be closed on home match days for the remainder of the 2019-20 campaign. All of Leicester City's football club remaining fixtures this season will be played behind closed doors owing to the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's sports news.
Thank you, Ayo. And the main news again. President Muhammadu Buhari today met with service chiefs in the wake of recent attacks and banditry in the northern part of the country. The president told them that their best is not good enough for the country. And that's it on the news at 10 tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Olumide Macaulay.